Hello, good morning. Let me know if you can see and hear me. It looks like everything's working on my end. And if it's not on your end, then the best thing to do is just to hit reload. The little, it might be called refresh or something up in there, up in the top corner of your browser. That usually fixes most problems in Crowdcast. So, yay, good. It's good to see people popping on in. Yes, there's a lot more energy in being live, isn't there? And it's so fun to be working on these habits, knowing that so many other people are, and knowing because it's like I get the texts back and I get the emails and I see the forum and it's just hopping and it's so much fun, especially when the habit is prayer. And just hearing from so many people that it's working is awesome. It's been working for myself also. So that's, I've been doing it for more than this week. I started officially myself the week before, because I was like, okay, I've been writing, I've been working this out. It's time to just do it. So this is week 2 for me, but, it's been wonderful. Yay, good morning, everyone. And you can see that there's a poll that you can take. So that's kind of our little accountability check-in. You can also ask a question because this is a troubleshooting chat. So this is, we're going to spend most of our time, about half an hour, 40 minutes or so, talking about the first week's habit and what did work and what didn't work, what you learned, because looking back and overcoming whatever obstacles came up during the week or figuring out what didn't work will help you move forward next week more than just forgetting last week and moving on, because we're not going to leave this habit behind us. We're going to keep this one as we plant a new one. If we keep with the seed metaphor, this habit, we're going to continue to water this habit as we plant another seed, right? Because these are just tiny, tiny seeds. So we can plant another seed, but we've got to keep this other one going. So instead of just moving forward, which is tempting, which is fun, instead of just plowing on forward, we are going to look back at this last week and notice what worked, notice what didn't work, troubleshoot, figure out what we can do better next week, and make sure that the next habit is as successful or more successful than this habit, and that we keep this one up too. So we've got to figure out, if this one didn't work, why didn't it work? And what can we do to move forward better? So I know for a lot of you, this habit really worked. And so that was awesome to see and hear from getting the texts, from seeing in the forum. I know once I started seeing the forum, people sharing what their index cards were and what they were doing, it's like, I've got to change mine. I didn't change mine, but it was super tempting because there were some great ideas there. So if you were, if maybe what you put on your index card wasn't connecting, or you didn't make an index card, you didn't follow the instructions, go through the forum and maybe find something that resonates. You can't miss an index card that's fluorescent orange. There's a hot tip right there. That's awesome. Yeah, and maybe it's time for the index cards or the Post-it notes to proliferate, right? It's like, that worked. Like, let's put one here and put one there. The only problem with putting them everywhere is that it can end up blinding you to them. Like, if they're everywhere, they're nowhere. So you still have to be strategic. It's just putting a card up isn't magic. It's noticing the card. So if we put too many up, we can start not noticing them because they just become part of the background. Yes, so it's totally okay to add another one. If this one really worked for you and you have a different, I would put it in a different place, a different trigger, then you can totally add another one, because especially because if it's worked and you've seen how it works, the trick will be making sure that you notice. It's easy to just ignore it when there are a lot everywhere. It has to be a trigger place where you will ensure that you see it and you will make yourself pay attention, because you're going to be tempted, especially as we add more things along, you're going to be tempted to just gloss over the card. And you have to make sure to not do it, because that's a habit. And we know that bad habits stick better than good habits, right? So we have to protect ourselves from the bad habit of glossing over the cards and not seeing it. We have to train our eyes, train our attention to pay attention to the card that we put up. So, yes, thinking about other things. I did that this week. It was just, and then I'd like turn away and say, oh, wait a second. Because the more we do it, the more natural it becomes, and then we miss it if we forget it. So that's really key. If you forgot to notice your card or didn't pray when you were in the right spot at the right time, when you remember, do it. It's not too late. And noticing that you didn't do it is a good sign. So it's not like, oh, there we go, fail. I forgot. It's fun to see the chat. Okay. If you forget, it's not a total fail, because then you turn away and then you realize, oh, I didn't do it. That means the habit is starting to stick. So it's a good sign. And what you have to do is, when you feel that reminder, you feel that like something was missing, you have to do it right then. And that's the nice thing about the trigger little tiny seed habits, is that they don't take long, so you can. So this next week is movement. And like I said, I've been cheating. I've been doing my habits for a couple of weeks. And so mine is when I wash my hands. After I wash my hands in my bathroom sink, then I'm supposed to do a squat. It just says a squat. And so yesterday I was just kind of in my own little world and washed my hands and then went downstairs. And as soon as I got downstairs, I realized I didn't do it. And, the kids are there playing right in front of me there in the living room as I came down. And I said, and they know they've seen my cards, so they know. So I just turned it into a joke, turned it into a funny thing, and said, oh no, I didn't do my squat when I washed my hands. And so I did one just right there. And so then they're like, what? That's a squat? I thought it was this. And then anyway, just doing it when you do remember, it will make sure it will be done. Right? So that's not nothing. And then 2, it'll help you remember when you're at the place, when you need to be doing it, because you won't want to do it else. You want that reward. This is the right place, the right time, and you know that you're going to do it. It's training yourself to do it. Yes. So that's cool. Lipstick on the mirror. All right. Yes. Noticing the card. It is easy to just let it become part of the background. So if you put your card in a spot and it was difficult to notice, then try thinking of a different spot, or, write it in a different way, like choose a fluorescent index card or a sticky note or something larger, or maybe just a different spot. So if you did have a spot that worked for you, share where your card is, and share if there's something different. Like let's let's share some index card or reminder trigger tips. What worked for you? We have fluorescent index cards. We have lipstick on the mirror. Let's share these tips here in the chat, because this is going to apply throughout the whole course, because we're going to be making reminders for ourselves for all of them. And they can't all be at the same time in the same place. Like, we need our mirror a little bit, right? We can't just totally fill it up. So face level, the placement on the mirror is a big deal. I put my one that's supposed to happen when I wash my hands. I put it right behind the sink, right behind the soap. So when I go to put the soap on my hands, it's like right there. Like my finger practically brushes it. So I put soap on my hands. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do it. Washi tape. The washi tape can help you draw attention to it. Dry erase marker on a full length mirror. That's awesome. Okay. And now I have a knocker on the door. Yeah. So behind the door, put your card by the hot water carafe with washi tape. So whatever helps you draw your attention to it. Yes. And having that time, it's like while you're boiling the water for coffee, or while you're washing your hands, while applying makeup, or whatever wherever it is, then that's your time for it. So like the squat after washing my hands doesn't take hardly any time. The prayer really doesn't take that much time, but whatever time you have, it's like, that's the time you have. Why not use it? So, my prayer reminder cards are on our bathroom mirror. It says, when I stand at the mirror, which includes washing my hands. So then that's something I can do. It's like, I remember that I'm supposed to pop a squat. That's what my card tells me. But I can't do that while washing my hands. Like, I've got to be there at the sink. So it's like, that's when I pray. And then after that, all right, do it. But there's also standing at the mirror while putting on the makeup. There's there's getting dressed. There's different things. Yes, where if you're going to have a place where you're going to be standing, doing something, like, why not make that a prayer time? So yeah, because it was in your bathroom, you found yourself saying it every time you were in there. That's awesome. Yeah, so finding those spots really helps it work and stick. Okay, so now I see that questions are popping up, but I haven't read any of them yet. But what I love is, so if you haven't seen the poll, there is a poll there to hop in and let me know how often you kept your prayer habit. It looks like most people have done it more than once every day. So that is awesome. And then there are some people that didn't make a visual reminder. So I want to know, if you did not make a visual reminder for yourself, if you didn't do an index card, you didn't do a Post-it note, what did you still do it every day? Or the people who didn't make a visual reminder, the people who did it fewer than half of the days? A card on the fridge, that's a good idea. The card that helps you remember, that prompts you to pray, that reminds you of, it really is the trigger, at least until it becomes a super ingrained habit. We need the visual reminder. We cannot rely on our own brains, our own memory to remind us of what we want to be doing. We have to move that reminding system outside of ourselves. So that's the job of the index card, the Post-it note. It's not to, we might end up still doing our habit without it. It can become so ingrained that we don't need it. But until we get to that point, we're going to build that habit a lot more quickly and a lot more strongly if we have a visual cue right there, some kind of reminder. The trigger that you want might not be, seeing the card. The trigger that we decide on might be, washing our hands or standing up in the morning or boiling the water. There's an action, and that's good because those actions are going to last longer than an index card, right? But you need to have the reminder while you're, planting the seed, because if you just rely on your memory for it, then you're going to forget, and then it's going to not really stick. Or, if you're just hit and miss, then it's going to take a lot longer and be a lot harder to build that habit. So even though you do want a cue, a trigger that is, not the index card, trying to think of a planting metaphor, like what's something that helps make a little hole for your seed to go in? It helps us create that spot. It helps us remember, because really our brains are not the best for reminding ourselves. So that's, if you hang around on my site for very long at all, you'll see, brain dump, create a task list. We do this to get stuff out of our head so we can use our head for creative thinking, for problem solving, for praying. But the more responsibility we place on our brain, our memory, the less we can use it for other things. We need to clear out the stuff that's better done on paper. If we can put our reminders on paper and make them external instead of internal, it's a way of decluttering our internal processes, and it'll help us think better, help us problem solve better, help us do creative thinking better. So it is really important to make that visual cue for yourself. Even if it's temporary, it makes it mentally easier than if you're telling your mind, like, no, brain, this is your job. You have to remember this at this time. You're putting stress on your mind. And we want this to be relieving stress, not creating stress. So that's why we keep the reminder outside of ourselves and just do it when you see it. There we go. So, what rewards have you noticed as you have built this habit? Has the reward that you chose happened? Have you noticed other rewards? So as we practice the habit and build it more, we can start shifting things. Like you might say, I tried it for a week and I need to shift the trigger a little bit. I need to maybe create a different visual thing, or I need to move it. I need to do something to switch up the cue because it wasn't the best one for me. And then also on the reward side, you picked a reward when you set it last week. And so was it a good one? Did it happen? Maybe there was a better one. Maybe as you go along, you start noticing the rewards, especially as, just being prompted, like being told, like, you have to recognize that there is a reward. Sometimes that's all we need to start realizing, oh yeah, this. And I know that you guys have them because some of you have shared with your replies on the texts. So choosing that reward can be hard, and it's going to be hard every time. But I think especially this next week, because it's movement. And there we go. Yep. We got Abby's who pushes our coffee button. Boom. We're going to choose a reward like that for our exercise movement habit coming up later today, because I think that kind of physical it's like the high five. It's like giving yourself a high five. There's just, if we're going to do something like a jumping jack, a squat, a push-up, whatever kind of little mini exercise, also doing something that's a physical with your body kind of reward, where you might feel a little silly, especially at first, but try it. Just try it. It's super easy. You say, I want a half hour of exercise built into my day. And so you go there and then you come home from the gym or from your walk or from work after the video is over and you feel like crashing. And you're like, right? It's not just me, right? Hold a plank during your prayer habit. You can like build it all in. Oh my goodness. So that's kind of like an anti-reward afterwards. And it's hard not to do, okay? Because it's like, but this is going to be a movement, an exercise thing that's not going to leave you worn out at the end. And it's not like all the exercise you need, right? But it's a little something. And we've seen with prayer, a little something it helps you grow, right, into bigger things. So start super, super, super small. But on the reward end, let's say we have, with the prayer habit, we want to notice those spiritual rewards that we receive from doing, feeding our souls and our relationship with God in that way. And then on the body end of things, like do a reward that's tied to your body. So whether that's a, yes, or a high five to yourself in the mirror, or just a thumbs up, or some kind of little energetic yes, and even if you'd say something, or at least a movement where you would, you don't have to do a burpee. I hate them too. I don't have the space for them at a good spot too. So you have to think about the space that you have, something you can do quick. And if you have an exercise habit, a time where you're on the treadmill or take a walk or do a video or whatever, that's awesome. You're going to keep that up, but that's not a seed habit, right? So you have to also plant this new little seed. So I'm getting distracted. That's looking forward, and we are troubleshooting what's behind. So, yes, putting on a joyful smile would be a good reward for any of these habits. That's true. And that can be a habit in itself. The reward then becomes a habit, and it's easier to turn to joy. And that's one of the great things about the prayer habit, is that even though it's so small, it sets our minds on things above. It helps us remember what's truly important, and it shifts our attention off of ourselves and onto God, reminding us that He's sovereign, He's got this, we don't, and we don't have to. And I think it's so easy as we just move along our day, and we've got this, that, or the other thing to do, and we're thinking about this, that, and the other thing. We're just all in our own heads, on our own agendas, and that's not spiritually healthy for us. And even just these teeny tiny little kind of heart recalibrations end up having a bigger effect than it looks like they would have, because it's not really about, making a really, a 10-second petition and expecting an answer right away. What this prayer habit is turning our hearts and attentions to God and giving over ourselves, even in just this tiny, tiny way, giving over our time and ourselves in this little tiny way regularly helps us do it at other times too. And I know that some of you have seen that. So if you have an example, or you just want to say, yes, that happened for me this week, share that in the chat box too. The effect of the tiny habit of prayer affects the rest of the day. Not like it's a little magic fairy dust that makes the day better, right? But it's building the habit of turning our attention to God, and maybe even noticing, like, I am not in a spirit right now that wants to pray. And so then you can say, oopsies, that's not good. So what you have to confess and turn to Christ then and there. If you find yourself, that prayer reminder is up in, the upstairs bathroom. So you find yourself, I'm just, I'm going to be using this bathroom down here, it turns out. It's like, then that, you've got something hiding that needs to be, you've got a weed there that has to be pulled out for the plant to grow. Yes, so scripture popped into your mind more throughout the day. It helps us notice our own pride. Yeah, that's for sure. My prayer helped me look for ways to do good to my children and husband instead of being a drill sergeant. Yes. And that's going to help as we keep going, because we're going to be building habits on that end too, right? My prayer helped me love God's word more. Amen. I shared with someone this week, I have my morning Bible reading time, and I figure even if it is something like, okay, I'm going to do it because this is my time for it, even if my emotion is more of a, well, check the box for the day. This is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. That's good. That's better than nothing, right? You've got to start somewhere, so still just do it. You learn to love what must be done by doing it. But starting the day with prayer, because, going into the bathroom is the first thing you do in the morning. And then throughout the day, it changes my attitude. And it's like, well, of course I want to. This is something that's lovely and wonderful. And how could I not want, it just refocuses our hearts. And yeah, it is, it's amazing. And, we're turning to God, and God gives us his word, and that little prayer helps us to love his word and want it more in our lives. So yes, that's awesome to hear all your stories in the chat box, and the chat log will be a part of the replay on the program page. So even if you miss some of this now, the chat log will be on the program page. I discovered that the times I brush my teeth, I'm often tired and grumpy, and this helped me to pull out of my grumpiness and focus on higher things. That's awesome. I almost read that helped. You said help to pull me out of my grumpiness, which is true, because sometimes, we get that way and we try pulling ourselves out, like, grin and bear it, or just we end up not even having a different way to try to pull ourselves out. And prayer is. And so the more we pray, and even just these tiny little prayers, the more we pray, the easier it is to pray, the more naturally we turn to prayer, and we realize, I don't have to pull myself out of my own bad attitude. I don't have to, I can't change my own heart, and I don't have to. God does that. And I have the ability to just turn to him and ask him to change my heart. And I have to be willing to have my heart changed. I can't be grappling the bad attitude to myself. I have to say, please, and want it, God, which I think as we go along, we can realize that, I actually don't want my bad attitude to go away. I kind of liked that. That was my pet. But it's through prayer that our heart changes. It's because it's God's work and not ours. So let me see here what some of these questions are. Sometimes the bad attitude is more comfortable. And so what this seed habit of prayer does is it makes prayer more comfortable. Like it makes it natural. We start getting used to it. We, instead of it feeling awkward and like something, we aren't used to doing, or we feel like it has to be in this certain time or this certain way or a certain length or whatever. Just this tiny seed habit helps us realize that we can just pray a little bit right here, right now. I can just give this over to God. I can turn my attention and say, this is not about me. Forgive me for making this about me. Help me to do what you want me to do. Yes. So, yeah, it's easy to forget that, to think it's like our job to change our heart. And I mean, we have a responsibility, and our responsibility is to repent, and then God changes us, right? Okay. So, so here's one of the questions. How do you see long-term progress or growth in your life with tiny seed habits? When the actions are so small, sometimes it's hard to feel like you've made actual life change, and it's motivating to see progress. That is true. It is motivating to see progress. And that's one reason why we end up, trying to make these big goals or bite off more than we can chew. But I think most of us have had that experience of trying to do a total life makeover and being super motivated and excited. But the thing is that it doesn't bring lasting progress. So, we end up being that hare that rushes forward, and you can see like, oh, look, he has gone so far so quickly, but then he ends up having to take a nap. And the thing is, in real life, it's not just a nap where you stay in the same spot. We're like on this, one of the moving walkways, like a treadmill, so that if you aren't going forward, you end up going backward. And then the tortoise is just the next step. The seed habit, especially with prayer, it makes us enjoy the process. Like it teaches us that we aren't just doing this total, like we aren't trying to make ourselves into whole new people right off the bat. And we're not just trying to do something. I'm trying to think of the right word. It helps us learn to love the thing we're doing, to help it become a part of us instead of just something that we do, to check it off the list because someone else says that we should be doing this because we have this idea of being a different kind of person. It actually, maybe we do need to become a different kind of person. We do need sanctification, but we don't jump very far and actually land where we want to land. It has the feeling of progress, but in the end, not as much. So the seed habit, it's like I said, it's not the 10 or 30 seconds it's not that 10 or 30 seconds of prayer is enough. But the 10 to 30 seconds of prayer shifts your attention, shifts your focus, shifts your desires, shifts your affections, and that has effects throughout the rest of the day. And then as these habits grow, like on the worksheets, there's that building block section. So as you're changing your taste, you're also thinking about what kind of prayer habits should I have in my life? When do I have for intercessory prayer? Who should I be praying for? Am I paying attention during the prayers at church or even at meals? To be thinking about where there's already prayer in our life, and are we participating in that? Where do we have time for a longer bit of prayer? And instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to reserve this time and I'm going to do it, because we've had this time of seed habits planted, those longer times end up becoming easier. Not just easier, but we actually really want them for themselves. It's like we want to pray more. We now are seeing ourselves as someone who prays. And so then that will, I think that's pretty natural to start seeing with prayer. And that's, I mean, we start with prayer because it's the most important for sure. But I think as the chat shows, some of the texts that I've gotten back, it's easier to see how this tiny habit shifts our affections. And it's going to be a little bit harder for the next one, for exercise, because of course, it's not like we're going to get into shape by doing 1 squat or 3 jumping jacks, but it's changing our identity. We become someone who does this thing naturally, just in the little moments. This is something that we turn to. It's not something that we put off and then make this big ordeal production. This is just something that's a part of who we are. And that's what we're trying to shift. Who are we? What do we do? What do we like to do? Yes, so focusing on those small shifts, exactly. Let's see. Can you comment on differences that you've experienced between prayer for you versus Bible study? Scholé plays an important part in my life, and sometimes when I participate in Bible studies, it becomes more academic for me than prayerful. I learn the lessons in my head more readily than my heart. Any thoughts? Well, I think there's a place for both. Like, we should be reading our Bible for, reading our Bible and being familiar with it, loving God through reading our Bible and turning to his word. And then there's Bible study, which is, studying. It is using your brain. We're supposed to love God with all of our hearts and our minds and our strength. So I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I think that there's a place for all the different modes. It's not even necessarily that one has to come first. They all will build the other kind up. So yeah, I think the Bible study is good and devotional reading is good. And it doesn't have to be an either or sort of thing. Just like the seed habit of prayer, the little 10-second prayer in the morning isn't replacing a longer prayer time where you're really praying, for people, you're going through a prayer journal or anything like that. It's not replacing, it's helping us build our identity and shift our attention and change our affections. Yeah, and definitely help understanding God's word helps us understand it better devotionally. It's not like we shouldn't be using our brains then either. And maybe, you can start off that more academic sort of approach with prayer. And it doesn't have to be a super long or complicated thing, but, just asking God for wisdom and clarity and for him to keep your heart soft. And that's, he will. And reading is going to be one of the habits. So be looking for that. That's week 3. Can you share quiet time Bible study prayer resources? I read my Bible and I write down, I'll read a few chapters and I write down a verse or 2, or, sometimes it's more that stands out. And that's what I do. The previous video is still available. If my timer. you can find the previous emails, audios, replays at the program page, which I'll pop in the chat here, and it will be in the emails, all that. The program page has everything, and it will have this replay also. Okay, so if there are other questions, you can put them in there and I will add them to the forum like I did last time. If you've missed that, the questions that were in the forum from the kickoff chat are in the forum. Let's see. So Helen says on the habit of movement, do not be discouraged if you don't get the endorphin rush or high from exercising. I don't know if I ever have said it. It does come, but it takes time for your body to reach that point. The endorphin rush or high is what will prompt you to want to exercise more often. Be patient. I think that's part of being humble, right? Is being patient. It's not being all the way you want to be right away. But we have to, you have to have a reward for the habit to be built. So you can't wait for an endorphin rush to be your reward, like doing it until then. You have to give yourself a smaller reward, not chocolate, before you get that. So that's what, a thumbs up, just a little happy dance, something to say, to tell yourself, good job. Keep doing it. Not chocolate. I know. What if the happy dance is your movement? Baby steps, All right. So the worksheet and the first email for that next habit will be coming in a little bit more than an hour at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And pretty soon this will all be over on the program page also. And this has been a lot of fun. And you guys, there's a lot of great. The chat log will definitely be with the replay on the program page. And thanks for joining me.